April 15, 1912. The North Atlantic was still, the stars were bright, and the largest passenger ship ever built was sailing toward New York. But just 2 hours and 40 minutes after striking an iceberg, the RMS Titanic disappeared beneath the freezing water. More than 1,500 people died that night, making it one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. Over the last century, a massive catalog of books and movies has steadily blurred the line between the hard facts of the sinking and compelling cinematic fiction. By tracing the ship's timeline from its construction to its final moments on the surface, we can examine the specific evidence behind 5 of the disaster's most persistent myths. When Titanic launched in 1912, it was celebrated globally as the absolute peak of modern engineering. It was a massive symbol of progress, packed with technology that was considered revolutionary for the time. This high-profile debut eventually gave rise to a famous story that the White Star Line officially marketed their new ship as unsinkable. This vintage White Star Line poster shows a different reality. Notice the typography focuses entirely on size and destination. The company never used unsinkable in official slogans. That term was popularized by trade journals reflecting engineering optimism. As the ship began its voyage, another myth took hold: the claim that Captain Edward Smith was a reckless commander who deliberately ignored every iceberg warning. In reality, the ship's communication systems were under heavy strain. Titanic's wireless operators were overwhelmed with personal messages for wealthy passengers, and several incoming ice reports never reached the bridge. Captain Smith followed standard maritime protocols of 1912. Experienced captains routinely maintained speed if the ocean appeared clear, adjusting their course only slightly when ice was reported. Smith's decision to stay the course proved to be a fatal misjudgment. However, his actions were based on the standard operating procedures of his time, not a cinematic desire for danger. Moving forward to the collision, popular culture often presents a specific image: a massive iceberg tearing one giant continuous hole through the ship's side. Modern research reveals a complex failure. This schematic of the Titanic's starboard side shows the damage was actually a sequence of smaller breaches. These were localized but widespread, flooding multiple watertight compartments at once and bypassing the ship's primary defenses. This was worsened by 1912 metallurgy. The iron rivets used in the hull were prone to snapping under the pressure, while the internal watertight bulkheads were built too low to prevent water from spilling over into the next compartment. The disaster was the result of a cascading failure of engineering systems and material limits. As the evacuation began, the story of the third-class passengers took on its own legend, the trope that they were maliciously locked below deck by the crew. The ship did have physical gates, but they were installed to comply with U.S. immigration and public health regulations regarding passenger separation. They were a matter of legal compliance, not a tool for imprisonment during the disaster. The high death toll in steerage was caused by systemic obstacles. Third-class passengers were physically located deep within the ship's decks, far from the lifeboats, faced a confusing layout and severe language barriers trying to reach the deck. In the ship's final moments, one specific legend became permanent: the claim that the band played the hymn "Nearer My God to Thee" as the deck slipped away. The courage of the musicians is historically documented. They continued performing on deck to calm the panic, and none of them survived the sinking. However, surviving eyewitnesses provided conflicting accounts of the final song. Historians cannot definitively identify the last piece of music played on the deck. This specific hymn became a legend because it provided a sense of order and heroism in the middle of a chaotic tragedy. Real history is a web of engineering limits and systemic flaws that rarely matches the simple narratives found in movies. The true story of humans navigating an unprecedented disaster is often more fascinating than the myths used to explain it. In Part 2, we'll dive into the remaining mysteries, including whether lifeboats were launched half-empty and if only the wealthy survived.